In the year 1666, the grand halls of the Chehel Sultan Palace in Isfahan felt cavernous and cold. A shadow had fallen over the Safavid Empire, a shadow cast not by an invading army, but by the ghost of a glorious past. Shah Abbas II, a ruler of considerable energy and vision, had passed away, leaving the peacock throne to his eldest son, Sam Mirza Tokhtandasi. The 19-year-old prince was a stark contrast to his formidable father. He had spent his entire life confined within the gilded cage of the royal harem. He was a stranger to the world, to politics, and to the immense weight of the crown he was about to inherit. His succession ceremony was a lavish affair, a desperate attempt to project continuity and strength. Courtiers in vibrant silks and bejeweled turbans bowed low, their faces a mixture of hope and apprehension. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the low murmur of prayers for the new Shah. He was given the regnal name Safi II, a name that carried the heavy legacy of his grandfather, the cruel and capricious Safi II. This choice of name was seen by many as an ill omen, a dark portent for the reign to come. From the very first day, the reign of Safi II was plagued by misfortune. A devastating earthquake rocked the northeastern provinces, reducing ancient cities to rubble. This was followed by a brutal winter that brought famine and widespread suffering. The price of bread soared, and the common people, who had enjoyed relative prosperity under Abbas II, began to starve. Whispers grew louder in the bazaars and tea houses of Isfahan. The people blamed the new Shah, saying the calamities as a sign of divine displeasure. They said he was weak, that he lacked the divine glory, or far, of his ancestors. The court astrologers, their faces grim, confirmed the public's fears. They declared that the coronation had been held at an inauspicious time, that the stars themselves were aligned against the new ruler. The Shah, already struggling with ill health and a deep-seated insecurity, took these pronouncements to heart. He became withdrawn, rarely appearing in public and spending his days in the secluded chambers of the palace. He was haunted by the legacy of his father, whose portrait seemed to watch him with an air of disappointment. The administration of the empire, once a well-oiled machine under Abbas II, began to falter. The Grand Vizier, Mirza Muhammad Mahdi, a man of great ability, found his authority undermined by the powerful eunuchs of the harem. These eunuchs, who had raised the young Shah, now controlled access to him, poisoning his mind with suspicion and paranoia. They whispered tales of conspiracy, turning the Shah against his most loyal and competent officials. The military, which had been a formidable force under Abbas II, began to decline. The Cossacks, sensing weakness, launched daring raids into the Caucasus, burning villages and carrying off captives. The Shah's response was indecisive, his orders contradictory. The generals, accustomed to the clear and decisive command of Abbas II, were left in a state of confusion. The empire's frontiers, once secure, were now vulnerable. The treasury, which had been full at the time of Abbas II's death, was being rapidly depleted by the lavish spending of the court and the decline in trade revenues. The situation grew so dire that the court officials, in a desperate move, decided to take an unprecedented step. Convinced the Shah that the only way to appease the heavens and restore the fortunes of the empire was to stage a second coronation. They told him that the first one had been a mistake, that he needed to be reborn as a new king. And so, in the spring of 1668, a bizarre and theatrical ceremony took place. Safi II was symbolically dethroned, only to be recrowned moments later with a new name, Suleiman I. The name was chosen for its association with the great Ottoman Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, a symbol of power and justice. The hope was that this new name would bring a new beginning, a reversal of the misfortunes that had plagued the reign of Safi II. The ceremony was a spectacle of immense grandeur, even more lavish than the first. A new crown was forged, new royal seals were cast, and new coins were minted. The entire affair was a desperate gamble, a public relations exercise on a grand scale. But a change of name could not change the man. Suleiman, I remained the same insecure and indecisive ruler that Safi II had been. He continued to be a pawn in the hands of the court factions, the eunuchs and the queen mother. He retreated further into the pleasures of the harem, seeking solace in wine and the company of concubines. He had little interest in the affairs of state, leaving the day-to-day governance to his Grand Vizier. While the Grand Vizier struggled to hold the empire together, the Shah commissioned new pavilions and gardens. The brief and troubled reign of Safi II was over, but the shadow it cast would linger for a long time. The recoronation was not a new beginning, but an admission of failure. It was a sign that the Safavid dynasty, which had once produced giants like Shah Abbas the Great, was now in a state of decline. The reign of Suleiman would be a long one, but it would be a reign of stagnation and decay. It was a slow and steady erosion of the power and prestige of the Safavid Empire. The ghost of Abbas II, the great builder and conqueror, would continue to haunt the halls of the Isfahan palace. It was a constant reminder of a glorious past that was slipping further and further away. The story of Safi II is a tragic tale of a young man crushed by the weight of his inheritance. He was a ruler who was never meant to be king, a shadow emperor who presided over the twilight of a great dynasty. His brief rule was a footnote in the grand history of the Safavids, but it was a footnote that spoke volumes about the rot that had set in at the heart of the empire. The recoronation, the grand spectacle meant to erase the memory of Safi II, had in fact immortalized it. It was turned into a symbol of the dynasty's desperation and decline. The name Safi II would forever be associated with failure, a cursed name that had to be cast aside in a desperate attempt to change the course of destiny. But destiny, as the people of Persia knew, was not so easily swayed. The shadow of Safi II, the emperor who had to be crowned twice, would loom large over the remaining years of the Safavid Empire. It was a harbinger of the final collapse that was yet to come. The brief rule of the emperor who was not served as a somber prologue to the end of an era. The Safavid sun, which had shone so brightly, was beginning to set, and in the long shadows of its twilight, the memory of Safi II, the reluctant king, would forever be etched. The story of his reign is a cautionary tale, a reminder that a crown does not make a king. The ghosts of the past can sometimes be more powerful than the armies of the present. The Safavid Empire, once a beacon of power and culture, was now a ship adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Brief, unhappy reign of Safi II was the first sign of the storm that would eventually sink the ship of state. And so, the story of Safi II, the emperor who was and then was not, became a legend. It was a dark fairy tale told in the hushed tones of a declining empire. It was a story of a name, a crown, and the crushing weight of a legacy too great to bear. It was the story of a shadow that fell and never truly lifted. The courtiers' whispers filled the palace, questioning the new Shah's fortitude. Safi II often felt the cold judgment of his father's portrait in the royal gallery. The harem, his only known world, had not prepared him for the harsh realities of rule. Gnawed at the edges of the empire, a relentless and unforgiving foe. Each report of a Cossack raid was a fresh wound to the nation's pride. The Grand Vizier worked tirelessly, a lone pillar against a tide of chaos. Suleiman's new name felt like a borrowed robe, too large and unfamiliar. The second coronation's opulence could not mask the underlying fear. He found more truth in a goblet of wine than in the reports of his ministers. The empire's commerce, once a mighty river, slowed to a stagnant trickle. The architects of the recoronation watched their gamble fail in slow motion. People's memory of Abbas II's golden age became a painful myth. Suleiman's gardens bloomed, beautiful distractions from a dying state. The name Safi became a curse whispered by mothers to frighten naughty children. The final Shahs of the dynasty would inherit a hollowed-out empire. The story of the two coronations became a famous play in the bazaars. His weakness invited challenges that his father would have crushed instantly. The ink on the decree for his first coronation was barely dry when the troubles began. He saw conspiracies in every shadow, of his own palace. The Queen Mother's influence was a silken cord, tightening around the throne. Each new pavilion was a monument to his denial of the empire's decay. The royal treasury's emptiness echoed the hollowness of his reign. Generals longed for the battlefield, but were mired in the politics of the court. The second crown was heavier, weighted with the failure of the first. His reign was a fever dream from which the empire would never fully awaken. The borders of the empire frayed like an old, forgotten tapestry. He ruled a court of ghosts, memories of a time when their titles meant something. Astrologers' charts, once a guide, now only confirmed the inevitable decline. The laughter in the harem was a stark contrast to the silence in the council chambers. Suleiman, aged, his face a testament to a life of indulgence and regret. The empire was a beautiful, hollow shell, waiting for a final, shattering blow. The first tremor of the earthquake was a physical manifestation of the state's instability. The people's prayers for a strong king went unanswered. Safi II's signature on royal edicts was hesitant and weak. The eunuchs built a wall of whispers around the young Shah. The Grand Vizier often felt he was steering a ship with a phantom captain. The recoronation ceremony was a desperate prayer disguised as a political act. Suleiman's love for architecture was a flight from the crumbling architecture of his state. The shadow of Safi II, the cruel grandfather, loomed over the choice of the name. The empire's decline was not a sudden crash, but a slow, agonizing bleed. His father's armor, displayed in the hall, seemed to mark his own physical frailty. The Isfahan winter of 1667 was not just cold, it was filled with a sense of doom. The court poets, once singers of glory, now struggled to find words of praise. The second name, Suleiman, was a mask he wore until the end of his days. The empire's enemies on the frontiers grew bolder with each passing season. He was a king in name only, a prisoner of the luxury that surrounded him. The final chapter of the Safavid dynasty was written in the ink of his failure. The weight of the crown was a physical pain he often complained of to his physicians. The vibrant tiles of the palaces seemed to fade in color during his reign. He sought refuge in the intricate patterns of carpets, ignoring the tangled web of politics. The recoronation was the most expensive piece of political theater in a generation. His indecision was a poison that paralyzed the nerves of the empire. The memory of his brief, cursed reign became a ghost that haunted the peacock throne. The empire was a magnificent clock, and Safi II was the grain of sand that jammed its gears. His legacy was not in buildings or conquests, but in the cautionary tale he left behind. The silence of the Shah, in response to crises, was deafening. The royal seal of Safi II was used for so short a time, it became a collector's curiosity. He inherited an empire at its zenith and set it on a course towards its nadir. The eunuchs' control over the harem was absolute, and thus their control over the Shah was too. The second coronation's festivities felt hollow to the starving populace of Isfahan. Sulaiman, I would often trace the name Safi in spilled wine, a private moment of reflection. The empire's great families began to consolidate power in the provinces, sensing the vacuum at the center. His reign demonstrated that the divine glory of kings could indeed be lost. The story of Safi II served as a stark warning to future generations of rulers. Ultimately, he was a man defined not by what he did, but by what he failed to be.